Earborne Media.
Produkcja oryginalna Earborne Media.
Okay, cool. So, welcome everyone. This is next episode of Podcast Rowerowy, which is like the podcast about cycling. And today with me, the person who inspired me to start a podcast and to start recording a podcast. So, welcome. And hi, Patrick. How are you doing?
Hi, that's quite the introduction, man. I'm flattered. And I guess at some point I'd like to hear that story about how your podcast was inspired. But yeah, that's awesome, man. I am excited to be here. Oftentimes I'm on the other side of the microphone, and I think that's where probably as a podcast host I'm most comfortable. But I do get excited to be a guest on other episodes, and I think it's good to give me the other side of the table experience, right? And see what it's like to be on the other side of the mic. So thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
I hope it will be really comfortable and that it will be fun. So I will just tell you, the story was short. I started to look and search for podcasts that will be around cycling. And then your podcast popped up. And then I started to listen to this. And then I said like, oh, but maybe there are some podcasts on cycling in Polish, on bikepacking, on the whole thing. And then I knew that there is a bikepacking.com page. Or of course, you know, everyone was there. Everyone was searching. And then I said like, come on. Why not to start my own podcast? Because I had a podcast in some other areas like online training, etc. And then I said like, oh, maybe I will start podcast on cycling, and that's it. And then it clicked, and I said like, okay, I will maybe not be as good as you are and as great as your stories are, but let's do it. And then I just checked. I started in 2018.
Okay.
So
what month do you remember?
I see that the first episodes are in November and December 2018.
Yeah, so we started we started right around the same time. I think mine was November 2018. Yeah, November, it was like November 6th, 2018. I think is when the first one was released. So yeah, we started each other right around the same time. Yeah,
I remember there were like 2 or 3 episodes of your podcast were available.
Yeah.
And I said like, oh, I want to do this.
Yeah. It's interesting. People found out about it very early on. Like bikepacking.com reached out to me after 3 episodes and wanting to feature the podcast. And I think it speaks to there just weren't a lot of podcasts out about bikepacking specifically at that time. Now we have quite a few, which I personally think is great. I know for me, there's no way I could tell every single storyline that's going on, and it's a big world. And so I'm personally, I think seeing all the different platforms, seeing all the different podcasts pop up and stuff, I think it speaks to, you know, the growth of the sport, which is part of why I started a podcast. Was I wanted to promote bikepacking and getting people outside on their bikes, and I think that's fucking awesome. Oh, can we cuss on this podcast?
Yeah, we can.
I won't cuss.
No worries.
Do you edit your podcast?
Yes, not personally. So I just started to have like my friend. He's got like an agency, it's like producing podcasts, and he is producing my podcasts since this September. And then I had an editor for more than a year, so I wasn't able to spend so much time. I started with editing. I like editing. I know how to do it. But it's so much time consuming. When you want to do it right, then it's so much time consuming. Then I said like, okay, I will search for the stories. Because to me, like searching for the story is always the fun part, right? It's like editing then is like, I've heard the story already. So, I was just, but what was your motivation when you said like, okay, I want to promote this, but what was your story behind it? Like, you wanted to make it your job, or you said like, okay, I'm just like, okay, I will be a full-time podcaster, like, or what was it?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer succinctly, but I'll do my best. I would say that at that time in my life, I was fairly successful in my real estate career. At that point, I was probably like 12 years into a real estate career. I was married, had 2 kids, and life was pretty, I guess, established, right? Like money was decent, and married, and they got the 2 kids and the house and the car, right? It's like I did all the things, and to be honest, man, I found that I was really unsatisfied with life. Like I wasn't, and I know it sounds cliche just it coming out of my mouth, but I just wasn't satisfied. Like the things that I was doing, specifically my job, not my family life per se, but specifically my job wasn't fulfilling me, right? Like I'm dealing with people's money, and when you deal with people's money, things get kind of funny and emotions get out, and it kind of gets ugly, man. And after doing that for over a decade, I was looking for a way to do something that made me feel good, honestly. And so I am passionate about the outdoors. I'm passionate about our wild spaces. I'm passionate about connecting people to those places. And prior to the podcast, I tried, doing some YouTube videos. I tried like blogs on, I don't know, it's highlighting state parks or highlighting different trips you could go on. But essentially I was kind of doing the similar thing of just how can I share my experiences and how can I do something that feels good. And what feels good to me is connecting people with outdoor and wild spaces. And so through a series of that, I eventually started a podcast, and like you, I think I was inspired to. I like the format of podcasting. I think that's why I really gravitated towards it, because I really enjoy. I have a high level of curiosity, and I want to know like the details. Like I want to know the how, the why, exactly how hard was it, and I don't want the highlights. I don't want the 5-second clip on YouTube, the 5-second shorts or whatever. Like I want to understand. And what I was experiencing in my own personal life is when I was consuming a lot of podcasts, and I felt like I don't know, this might be too big of a reach, but I felt like I was gaining a better understanding of the world that I live in and the people that live in it, because it allowed me to get granular with those people. Like if you're listening to a musician who is successful or an author or an athlete or whatever, through the podcast format, you're going to understand how hard they worked, how much they had to sacrifice, the things they didn't get to do, the times that they failed, the thousands of times they failed before they eventually succeeded. Like whatever their story is, you're going to hear that. And when you understand that, I think that's something that I could internalize and be like, okay, I can do that too. I can replicate that. I can work hard. I can sacrifice. I can put all my time, attention, and energy into one thing and try to make it good. And so I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of hard to answer succinctly because I started the podcast when I was like 38. So I was relatively older, and there's just a lot of things that coalesced in life. I've been a long time entrepreneur. I've never worked for anyone else pretty much. I've pretty much always owned my own businesses. And so I just have that entrepreneurial spirit as well. So it's not uncommon for me to like have an idea and run with it, so to speak, and this was just one idea that I really hit at the right time. There weren't a lot of people talking and doing podcasts about bikepacking, and there was a niche, I guess, that hadn't quite been filled, and timing's everything, right?
Yeah, I think it's like 5 years ago, the bikepacking itself wasn't like a huge thing, right? It was grown up, but it wasn't that big as it is now at the moment, right? It's like, if I see most of the companies are just producing bikepacking bags, I said like, what? It's like,
yeah.
It's like, really? It's like everyone's doing this, but it's like what I think is amazing is like 2 guys almost the same age, almost the same setup, like house, family, and a job in 2 different parts of the world are doing very similar job, and it's like it's so amazing. It's like it amazed me that I think that we will be able to maybe find 5 or 6 more people from different parts of the world. Very similar age, very similar motivation, very similar thing to do. It's like, and you think that sometimes I think it's like, oh, I'm just doing something unique. And then you say like, yeah, it's unique in your bubble, but then there are hundreds or maybe at least dozens of people who are doing very, very similar things. But going back to this, it's like, I think it's like today is the time when Spotify published the Wrapped of 2023. And I must say, I watched this and my eyes glazed a bit. It's like, oh, it's like really few thousand people are really have it in your top 10. And it's like, I would say it's like a social proof of something that you do it right. So what do you feel when you see how large the community of your listeners is? How do you feel of, the queue of people who would like to talk to you? Because of course, I think you're hunting for some people that you would like to talk to, but then for sure there are people who are just coming like myself. It's like, Patrick, I would like to, grab some of your attention and then tell you a story. So how do you feel about this, let's be honest, this success after 5 years?
Dang, good question. This sounds like a question I would ask somebody. And, Hannah, in the last episode, I just released it yesterday. I asked her a similar question because she finished the Triple Crown of bikepacking. And I asked her, have you taken the time to reflect and how do you feel about what you've accomplished? And she said something along the lines, I'm grateful for experiences like this because they forced me to sit down and actually think about it. And I'm guilty with Hannah, right? Like I don't probably spend enough time reminiscing or reflecting on, the quote unquote success of Bikes or Death. It is mind blowing to me. It truly is. Like it has never become normal. It has never become anything other than kind of like mind blowing. Like I'm living in this alternate reality and I just happen to be, it's like I just happen to be the guy. But it is very weird because, as you know, we sit in our houses 99% of the time and talk to people from all over the world. And I am trying to be much more intentional about getting out into the community and creating events where I'm bringing, community members to me, or I'm getting out and going to where they are. And that's a big motivation for me. But outside of that, man, you're really just sitting in your house, talking on the internet to people. And for me, I'm trying to speak my truth. I'm trying, like, that is a goal and a promise that I made myself from the very beginning. And that is to be authentic to who I am to the best degree that I can be, because I can't, if you want to have longevity, if you want to talk to somebody for 2 hours, you can't fake it for 2 hours. I don't have 2 hours of sound bites I can give you and I can practice for, like I just, the only thing I can do is be my authentic self, and hopefully that resonates with other people. And so that's like a big reminder as, the podcast has quote unquote become successful and it has a large audience, that is what I try to remind myself to do, is to be authentic to myself, pursue the stories and the people and the thoughts and the ideas and the trips and the places that inspire me and make me feel passionate and make me feel excited. And I think if I can do that, because that's how the podcast started. I was chasing my passion, right? Like never had any thought that the podcast would be anything other than maybe 100 people would listen to. And that's true, right? And so what I learned from that is I chased my passions, I followed my heart, and it resonated with people. And so what I learned is I need to just keep doing that to the extent that I can. And it's hard, right? Whenever you get success and you have people from all over, you're talking about people that want to come on the podcast. Sure, I got people that want to come on the podcast. I have people that want me to come on their podcast. I have people that mostly people just want to give me their opinions, I mean, sure, you get lots of those, just, lots of opinions on what you did right, what you did wrong, what you could have done better, how you misspoke, and all these things. And so there's a lot going on around me. And yeah, I just try to stay in my own lane. I try to do my thing, and that really is the core component of it, is try to stay true to myself and follow the things that make me feel inspired and get me fired up, And I think that hopefully continues to resonate.
Yeah, I think you've got like a ton of curiosity in you, because it's like it's when you talk to people, it's like you are literally when I listen to your podcasts is you are really curious about what's going on, what stopped them, what paused them, what's word, and I what I really appreciate, what I look in my podcast and what I really appreciate in your podcast, you ask about emotions. You ask about how did you feel. So if you just, and this is, I think you are just pushing people a bit to reflect. You're pushing them a bit. It's like, and they need to pause. And I just really appreciate those moments because those are unique experiences. I would say you will read them in the books when someone is reflecting on something, but I'm getting this from your podcast. And what I want to ask you next is, when you do this, do you feel that you are doing a job of making some stories public, or that if you are not doing your job, some of the stories, some of the history, some of the experience, some of the knowledge may be lost or gone? Or do you feel this kind of mission that, okay, I talk to people who are, who have like a big community, who I will how to say it nicely, I will benefit as a podcaster by interviewing this person because they have a large audience, etc. And
absolutely
everyone does it, right? But then what I think is the flip side of this is I want to talk to people whose story is such a unique thing, and I'm just giving them a space, a time, because there is a high risk that their story will be lost and they will never be heard.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm going to think about it for just 1 second, because it is my motivations for episodes, they change and they vary depending. And you're right. Like, I will say that, I don't think that I've ever done an episode just to get the shares or the notoriety or whatever like that. I've had opportunities to interview bigger people in other disciplines, and I don't do that. I stay in my lane again. I focus on the things that I'm really passionate about. But I am aware of the fact that sometimes those things overlay. It's like I interview Payson McKelvin, who's a big-time podcaster and a Red Bull athlete, or a Chris Burkard that has 4 million Instagram followers.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely like those guys. And, if we're talking about business professionalism and like, you and I are in a similar space, those are guys that are creating content and going on bike trips and doing things that I really respect. And so my motivation with those is always like, I just respect those. And there's a lot that when you see someone being successful at something, there's a lot that we can gain from that, whether they're winning a race or a very successful content creator or whatever that may be. So that's one part of your question. The other part that I wanted to touch on is like, you asked me about my question, my feeling of almost obligation to ask the right questions. And I do have that. I do think that I also have, fortunately, I am by nature, just a really like hearts on my sleeve. I kind of just in my personal life, I cut through the bullshit. Like I'll ask you how you're doing and I'll mean it, I get into deep conversations with the lady that's cutting my hair or the lady at the gas station or whatever. And people in my life know that. Like I am just a genuinely curious person who really values, honest and authentic conversations that go below the surface. And that's just who I am at a baseline. And so whenever I'm talking to people in that manner, it's just who I am, right? Like that's just genuinely, if you and I were talking, I was interviewing you, I'd want to know more about your home life, your kids, like how you're able to balance all this stuff when you get to go ride, like, all this stuff. Like I want to know all these things because that's just who I am. And then this is a long answer, but the third part was about kind of the obligation to capture either that story or the history or whatever it is. And that I do feel. And like when I talk to like Jay Petterberry or Lael Wilcox or Kurt Refsnyder or Alexander Houchin, or, the list goes on, but Sophie on, like, I do feel like there's a record keeping aspect of it, like that will be out there forever. And I feel an obligation to, I want to put that out there. I want the community to have access to those stories. I want them to have access to that moment in time. And I think that it is important. It's a big answer, but a little bit of everything.
That's a great answer. What I can add on top of it is with the gentleman that which his name I just posted you, he's like, well, I just recorded with him already 3 episodes, and he's like, a big player, big racer. And what I think is one thing that I would just want to add on top of it. People gain trust with you as a host, with me as a host, and they know how the story will go. They know that you will give him space. They know that they are not in the news when they will have 30 seconds and 2 sentences, but your guests, I think they appreciate the podcast because they know you, they appreciate your curiosity, and they trust you, and they know that you will release the top quality content. And I think that's something that comes with responsibility that you bring. And I think that is why I wanted to ask, like, are there many episodes that you have not published due to whatever reasons? And are there such things? Because I have few of those that I haven't published, and I explained people why I haven't done this. But I'm just curious. Have you ever like not published? Like it's somewhere there due to some reasons.
Yeah. I have. There hasn't been many though. And going back to the historicity of Bikes for Death briefly, I touched on how I had tried some other things. Well, I actually tried another podcast that was not bike or outdoor related at all, and that podcast was so bad. I mean, it never released. It never took off. We never launched it ever. We recorded some episodes and it was no good. So going back in history, like I do want to put out good content. And also when I started the podcast, I did not tell a single person. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody about my podcast because I didn't want it to suck, right? So I put it out there, and I'm like, if it's good, people will find out about it, and if it sucks, then no one needs to know. I don't need to tell people that I put out a bad podcast. So I'm sensitive to that. I'm also sensitive to the fact that what I'm connected to is real. Is the real, the non-filtered, what is the story? Humans are not perfect. Again, when I was listening to podcasts, that's something I really valued. I'm like, oh yeah, we all stumble through our words. We all kind of misspeak sometimes. And it's like, I get comfort in that because I'm not perfect. And so, I am sensitive to all these things. There's only been 2 episodes of Bikes for Death that have not been released. One was because there was an audio issue when we had the echo thing going on earlier. There was an echo thing, and we didn't catch it when I was recording. It was with Kate Boyle, so we had to re-record that episode. Terrible. It was a terrible mistake on my part. And the second time was actually this past year. I did an episode with James Collins. And it was a mess, man. Like I was in Austin because I was about to fly out on an international trip to Mexico, and I was just there for like a couple hours before my flight, and so I was like rushing to pack to get ready, and then rushing to get ready for this interview, and then doing it, and then hopping on a plane and going to Oaxaca. And the episode reflected me being just a complete basket case, right? Like I wasn't focused. I wasn't asking good questions. I was interrupting him. It was bad. It was like listening to 2 buddies at a bar, and which is one style of doing it, but it wasn't. And I told him, I'm like, it was entertaining, right? I listened to it and I'm like, I laughed. It was funny. But what I didn't do is, give you an opportunity to highlight your story, or Yeah, like it is your episode, and that's the way I look at it. It's my podcast, but it's your episode.
Yeah.
And I want you to the rise to the top, and it's not my episode. And so anyway, yeah, those are a couple times, but I've been pretty lucky where I haven't had that happen too many times. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's like it's great that you highlighted this. That you said like it's sad that you host the podcast, right? Okay, you do host it, but I think it's like you're more on the side. You ask a question, you try to do the segues, you try to create a space, but
right
is the guest who is owning this whole time. And I would say I had like few episodes where I just asked like 3 questions and it was 1 hour and it was gone. And I said like, oh, and I really appreciate it because, someone just caught the wave and it was surfing through the stories and it was amazing. But what I just recalled is the once there was a story of you wanting to have a podcasting van, right? Is it still operational or is it was just you just left the idea? Or how is it?
No, there's a story there. Yeah. So I did, well, I'll give the background for any of your listeners that don't know, but very early on in Bikes for Death days, I think within the first year, I was, talking about it and trying to crowd raise some money to build out a van as a mobile podcasting studio, be able to take it around, obviously mostly just North America and interview people in the back of my van. So I ended up getting the van, started building out the back, actually did some interviews in the back of it. Never built it out as quite a full podcasting studio. And part of that was because somewhere along the way, I realized that I would much prefer to just sit out on a camp chair around a fire or next to a river or whatever. And I actually want those ambient sounds being introduced in the podcast. And so the whole idea of isolating myself in a van, if I'm let's say I'm parked in a beautiful place and I'm interviewing someone, I'd rather just sit outside. And so along the way, I was like, I just would rather interview them outside anyway. So the only time I'd really use it if it was really windy or if it was rainy or something like that and I needed to be inside. And then I wound up buying, so I went through a divorce. I kept the van through the divorce, but I had to get a second car, like a daily driver. And so I bought a Subaru and I drove it a week after I got it, I drove it to the end of Tour Divide, and I was covering, doing podcasts for Bikes for Death at the end of the Tour Divide. Did all that, and then I drove Sophie and Manu to the airport in El Paso, and I drove back home to Bryan, Texas, and I got 12 miles from my house, and my engine blew up on that Subaru.
Oh my God!
And yeah, and so I was at that point, just financially, I had to sell the van just to help me buy another car. So anyway, that's what happened to the van. We tried it. It was fun. It was actually a cool van, but turns out I'd rather just talk to people outside anyway,
Because I'm thinking of it's just to have this kind of van thing for one of the races that is going on around here in Poland, and I'm thinking of it's how to. It was one of my ideas. It's oh, Patrick did it, so maybe I will just rent a van and we'll just go there. And then I've learned that people who are in the middle of a race, they want to race. They don't want to talk to you, right? And then I said, this may be a stupid idea, but I stole one thing from you, and this year I'll plan to steal or be inspired. Let's use this word with one
Either
more.
one.
So the one is a theme song for a podcast. This is something that I want to list. I want to know the story. How does it come from? Where does it come from? But I did the same. I just found an artist who resonates with me, and then I asked her, maybe you would like to write a song for the podcast. And she was so amazed with this that she did it. And there is a theme song for a podcast. And I said oh, that's so cool that you can have it because it's unique. No one will have it. It's done exactly for you. And and I know that you've got the same, so I just wanted to hear the story. Where does it come from? Because it's so unique. I don't know what's like, if it's more like country or it's like outdoor song, but it's like it is unique.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a great story behind it, and I really can't take much credit for it. So, speaking of vans, Miles Arbor, your guests or your listeners, I got to figure out who's who. Your listeners may know who he is. Miles Arbor works for bikepacking.com. He has a lot of different roles. He tests the gear. He does trips reports. He's in charge of the events, like posting those. But anyway, he's worked at bikepacking.com for quite some time now. And he and I were going to the same event. It was a bikepacking summit in Ellijay, Georgia. And this was back in the fall of 2019. So I'd only been podcasting about 10 months at that point. So I go there and meet Miles Arbor for the first time, and we had made plans to do an interview, and he said, "Hey man, let's chat in the back of my van," and I said, "That's perfect." So we chatted in the back of his van, and prior to the episode, Miles tells me to turn on my recorder. He's got a surprise for me. That's all he tells me. So I'm like, okay, great. So I turn on my recorder. He gets the mic set up in front of him. He pulls out this little guitar, which it's actually called a guitalele. It's a combination between a ukulele and a guitar, and so it's a little guitalele. And he had written this whole song. He performed it. What you hear on the podcast is the first and only take of that song. So we were sitting in the back of his van, and I just recorded that in real time. No mistakes, no edits, no nothing. That was a one take and done, and it's been part of Bikes or Death history ever since.
Yeah, but that's a great story. That's a great song. Like it's so, I would say it's you can't remove it ever from your podcast.
No,
it needs to stay there. It's so, I would say, solidified with the whole thing. It's like I hear it. I always smile when I hear it. It's like, because it's so. I don't know why it's not like very funny. It's like I would say it's like a nice beat. It's like a rock and roll, like a solid rock and roll, maybe like with a bit of outdoor country, but it's like, it's amazing.
I think you're right. If you know Miles, you are absolutely correct. I think there is absolutely an undertone of humor through the whole thing. He's singing it in relatively a serious, kind of a harder, rockier, because it's like a rock song being played on a guitalele, which has the country vibe, which is comical in itself. And then Miles is just a very comical. He is a naturally funny guy, and there's almost always an undertone of humor in almost everything that he's doing, just as a person. And so, yeah, the song is very clever, and I mean, I am beyond flattered. I mean, you were talking about how do I deal with like the success and stuff, and I mean, it's just how do I ever repay something like that? You know, like the community, unbeknownst to me, just somebody giving me that as a gift that I use, and that, you know, people from all over the world identify as being a part of my podcast. And like, I didn't do that. I didn't even know about it. That's just Miles doing something, and it's cool, man. It's a really neat feeling. I don't think I'll ever be able to wrap my head around it fully, or ever be able to repay it back. Maybe the podcast is the way I pay it back. You know, it just doesn't feel like it because I get so much out of it too, right? Like I get so much out of the podcast, but you know, hopefully other people are too, man. Then everybody's happy.
So I just wanted to segue a bit from podcasting itself to a bit to cycling, a bit to take your bicycle, pack your bags, and just go. Because what is the feeling I have from time to time is that I listen to great stories. I've even done this 2 times this year, that I just given someone a small recorder. They went to Kyrgyzstan. 2 of my friends were to Kyrgyzstan, and they recorded some audio. One gentleman is traveling now from Poland to Dakar, like, to Spain and Morocco, which is an amazing trip. And he's got the recorder, and whenever he's at the hotel and he's got the Wi-Fi, he's just sending me some audio. And I think it's like they're doing such a great thing. And I'm inspired by their stories. I'm inspired by their trips. But then I'm spending time recording, editing, publishing, doing more of the publishing and marketing job than really hopping on a bike and just going for, I don't know, a nice overnighter. So do you have similar feelings, or have you had the similar experiences? Like, okay, I'm doing this is my job, this is my podcast, but when I hear the story, I just want to go. I just want to leave. I want to travel. I want this to be my story.
I don't know what it is about me. I think it's just something that it's intrinsic to me, that and probably a lot of people can relate to this, that whenever you feel like you're doing something good for somebody, like if you're introducing to something you're passionate about, like cycling in the outdoors, and you're getting emails from all over the world and people DMing you and telling you how much they appreciate what you're doing. It creates a really good feeling. Like I'm aware that I'm providing value, and that value makes me feel good about the thing that I'm spending my time doing, right? So, the podcast is hard. You spend so much time, and you can't overemphasize that. No one will ever, unless they start one, understand how much time it takes. Actually, I won't call this person out specifically because I don't know if I have their permission to, but another bikepacking podcast host sent me a message at I don't know, it was months ago, and just said, "Hey man, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you. I didn't know how much I appreciated you until I started my own podcast, and now I realize how much work it is." And he's like, "I now understand how much time and effort you put in over the last almost 5 years." And he's like, "I just wanted to say thank you." And that comment meant so much to me, because people that they just don't know how much work goes into it, and it's not their job to know, but it is a lot of work. And so it's like, sometimes it's like, man, do I ever just want to like go on a bike ride and completely put down thinking about making an Instagram post, or, making a reel, or, could I record something for the podcast, or, take a cool photo, or, whatever it is. So much of all of my writing, everything that touches or is bike adjacent, is now in some way probably tied to the podcast, or I'm at least thinking about it in terms of, should I use this on my platform in some way? And so it's always tied to it, and that comes with a little bit of baggage, right? Something I'm always considering, and ultimately, I think where I've landed is trying to find more spaces in which me riding bikes and the podcast overlap. And so that's a big goal going into 2024. I think Bikes for Death is going to try to put on like up to 15 different bikepacking or cycling events. Or, I'm doing an AZT, ITT, I'm doing Mid-South, I'm doing, Ozark, what is it called? Ozark Despair. So I'm trying to ride more. Essentially, my goal is to find more ways for those two to overlap. And so I'm not necessarily sacrificing my riding time. But I will tell you, I mean, there are definitely times, and right now is one of them, where I'm not riding as much as I would like to. But I leave for El Salvador on Sunday, so in like 5 days, and then after that, I'll get back, and I really got to focus on getting training for next year, because, like I said, there is a lot of riding happening at the beginning of next year, and I need to be ready.
Yeah. So it's like, I just like outdoors now, it's like minus 10 Celsius degrees. So it's snowing. I want to try to go out and do some small trips there, but I'm more Zwifting, and this is the first year I just tried it, and I would say I didn't just like, you can have a really nice experience of doing this, but then I just said, like, I really like what you said. It's like a bit of systematic approach. It's like, okay, I need to organize in a way that there is a space for cycling, there's a space for podcasting, and maybe 2 less reels, few less photos, but more hours on out there, right? But what I wanted to do is that the segue to the Texas Showdown series, because this is also something I've been invited because I went through a bit of a crisis as a podcaster. I said, like, okay, I'm investing in the podcast. I'm investing time and money. I was a bit fed up with after. I would say it was a spring last year that I said, like, I will find a partner for podcasting. I will find a partner who I can from time to time record an episode, where we will be able to share some thoughts, who will just bring some value to the podcast. And I just met Marcin, and we are doing this together now. From time to time, we're just recording podcasts together. And then he's arranging ultra race in the south of Poland. And what he said, like, oh, so maybe if you do the podcast and we do the race, maybe around the race we can have some kind of festive event. Maybe we can have some live shows. Maybe we can have some discussions. And then I shared it with the other friend. He said, like, oh, it's like exactly like Patrick's Texas Showdown series. You're copying the next thing. And I said, like, come on, we are not doing this yet. We don't. But how did it came to the point where you said, like, okay, I want to arrange an event. I want to meet people. I want to shake their hands. I want to have a beer with them. Why? What was your motivation, right? You said, like, okay, you shared the story, you were satisfied, but then it grows into something that, oh, you are running an event.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you a story that kind of helps to articulate this answer maybe better than I can through Bikes for Death. Are you familiar with the Boy Scout and Eagle Scout program in Poland? Is that something that y'all even know about?
Yes. So it's the scouting idea. Yes, I know about this. There's some 2 or 3 scouting organizations that I know about. Okay.
Well, I'll give a little brief history. I was in the Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, which is essentially the highest rank you can be in our scouting program. And to be an Eagle Scout, you have to create a community service event or do some type of community service. It has to feature like 100 hours of, man hours and all these requirements. And so I did mine at 14, and I'll tell you what I did. So my goal was to do a bicycle rodeo. So that's essentially where you get, I was targeting kids, youth in the community to come to learn how to ride their bikes, to learn bike safety, to learn bike handling, to learn bike repair, all of these things. So to do it, at the age of 14, I got on my BMX bike and I rode up to the radio station and I asked them if they would volunteer some airtime for me to help promote my event. I rode my bike up to the Walmart parking lot and asked the general manager if we could utilize their parking space for this event. I rode my bike to the police station and to the fire department and to the bike shop and got them to, put on all those services from bike repair to bike safety and maintenance. And then we invited the community to come to this event. So it turned out to be pretty successful. I mean, we had a ton of people that come. I don't know. I mean, that was literally 30 years now. So I don't have the numbers on how many came, but it was well received. And I did that at 14. And then after that, I was a leader in the Boy Scouts, and I would take young men to, the mountains of Colorado or to Utah. And so I think what that speaks to is like at a very young age, at the first opportunity I had at 14, it's like, what do you want to do? What community thing do you want to create that brings value? And at 14, I created a bicycle rodeo, right? And so I think that I've always had this natural aptitude and an interest in bringing people into it and actually creating the community. And so it was never really an accident. Like once Bikes or Death, the podcast, got to a point where I'm like, okay, this is tracking with people. This is resonating. I quickly, identified that for me, the next step was going to be create the community in real space. And then it's how do I do that? And, the first event was the East Texas Showdown. That was the first event. And I'm happy to talk about how that specific one came to be if you want me to. But
sure, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that one, the reason that one was the first is partially access. One neat thing about Texas, or one unique thing about Texas, is like, it's not really what you would envision as a target-rich environment for outdoor activity. It's not where people are going to ride their damn bikes, so to speak. Typically, we're going to the American West is where everybody is attracted to typically. So what I just wanted to create an event in Texas that I thought would service local Texans and give us this bike packing racing style of event. And my whole idea was to create an event that I would want to go to. I literally just kind of put a white piece of paper on the table and said, okay, if I could create the perfect distance, the perfect vibes, the perfect, what are we giving awards for? How hard is the route? How long is the route? All these things, what would I create? And essentially, that's what I came up with was the East Texas Showdown. It takes place in the Sam Houston National Forest, which is part of one of the largest swaths of public land we have in Texas. So most people probably don't know that less than 3% of Texas is public land. So we have very little public lands here. And the East Texas Showdown route takes advantage of a large section of the public lands that we do have available. And that happens to be an hour and 15 minutes from my house. So I'm just familiar with the area. I've ridden there a lot. I was able to easily develop a route in that national forest area. And yeah, so I mean, I put together kind of the framework of okay, I want these different events. I want... for anyone who doesn't know, I guess I should just briefly explain. The East Texas Showdown has 3 events. It starts with the shortest one is we call it the lowdown, and it's 170 miles, and it's not a race. We don't give you awards if you finish in a certain time, or if you don't finish. It's just a ride. It's a bike packing trip. You can do it with your friends. You can do it solo. Doesn't matter. Then we have the next step up, which is the slowdown, and that's 280 miles. And that one kind of blurs the line between a fun group ride and racing. And we have awards for, the heaviest bike or the best dressed or the person who took the best photograph. And then we have the showdown route, which is 400 miles. And that one is just purely a race. And so, my whole goal was to kind of figure out a way to blur the lines between people who just want to go and have fun and get on their bike, get on their bike for the weekend with their friends, and the people who wanted to go fast and push themselves. And then I think, a big component of the Showdown series is it all happens within a 3-day weekend. So at the end on Sunday, we have the Hoedown, which is a party, and we give out awards and prizes, and we celebrate everybody's accomplishments. And that I think is really the glue of those events is one, I'm bringing in, I'm casting a wider net of people that can participate and trying to bring everybody into one place, and then having everybody stick around and share their stories and get to meet other people of the community. And that's the community building aspect. It's so often, and this is what I was wanting to solve, is you finish these races to empty parking lots to the Mexican-American border, and there's nobody there. There's one person there if you're lucky. And that is a big thing that I wanted to address and create something different with this, with these series of events. And so yeah, that's kind of how it all came to be. And I think that it's successful because of the community aspect. Like, people keep coming back because they come out and they hang out with their friends, and they keep having that shared experience. And again, that's the glue. That's what makes those events really special. And it's fun for me because, like, I'm a lifelong Texan, and I'll be honest, like, Texas isn't my favorite state. There's a lot of states that I'm like, oh, I'd like to live there or whatever. But it's been really nice to see people come from all over the world. Last year, we had 5 international people come from all over the world. So, and they're coming to Texas, and they're having these, like, really amazing, almost transformative experiences. And what it's doing is they're breaking down these barriers of, like, people have these ideas of what Texas is like or what Texans are like. And then they come and they ride 400 miles in East Texas, and they're like, oh, that was cool. And people were nice. And it dissolves some of those barriers that we create. And that's one of the things that was like an auxiliary thing I didn't anticipate, but I feel like it's like almost a melting pot, where, like, the people in East Texas that, tend to cows most of the day might see a crazy cyclist come in that's wearing a pink tutu and a mohawk, and those two worlds are colliding, but, like, in a really cool way, and they're both having a really good and a really great shared experience. So it's, long answer, but I really, I love the event community building side. It's also a passion of mine for sure.
Sure. So thank you very much for this explanation, because I really love what you said. It's like, I design it in a way how I want to, in a way that, I would love to participate in this kind of event. And it comes to me like when I've been asked, like, why you did this podcast in this way, I said, like, you know what? I just sat and started to design it in a way I wanted to consume it. And I really love this as you said, this meltdown, this, if you are to just do the bike packing, maybe this is a first bike packing in your life, then here's the part for you. Then I think this is also a given an opportunity that you can grow up with the event. If maybe you've rode it once or twice, the bike packing, then you will just go to this middle part, and maybe if you are a really ambitious person, you will race, right? But you don't have to, right? You can go back. And that's something I really like here, is that, the formula of the event is not forcing anyone to do something. It's, okay, pick your part, pick where you belong the most, which resonates the most with you, and then be with us together. And this is the added value, right?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. No, it's fine. I couldn't agree more. And I would say that I didn't mention this, but this is a critical mission for me, and that is to intentionally break barriers within cycling groups. And I don't think we have strong barriers, but, like, I really like the idea of the guy with Lycra with the $15,000 bike riding next to the guy in denim shorts with a single speed on a 1980s bike. Like, I want those two guys to ride together, or women, or whatever. And I my tagline is just ride your damn bike, right? Like, any bike, anytime, any way, it doesn't matter. We're all cyclists, and I'm intentionally wanting to break down, whatever social or societal or whatever barriers there are, and create space for people to just come and participate with cycling in the way that makes sense to you, and not to feel any kind of pressure to wear the most expensive kit or bring the most expensive bike. In fact, we're going to celebrate you for doing the other thing too. Like, we can celebrate all those things in the same place. And yeah, that is definitely an intentional and purposeful thing that I'm trying to create. And seems to be working pretty well so far. So they're all playing nicely.
I have 2 more questions. The one is a standard question for my podcast, and this will be the last one. But before that, I wanted to ask you about what is your way of thinking on the self-support races, because the self-support means so many different things nowadays. Is in one of the race, the self-support means, okay, you just need to deal with everything on your own, and you can't even buy someone else a coffee because it will break the self-support rule. In the others, they are like, okay, if you don't have a big truck following you, feeding you, and taking how do you think of this idea and how strict this maybe should be? What are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this is a perfect piggyback question on the last topic, because for me, this falls into the similar category of, run your damn event any way you want to, right? So, I like options. I don't think that we should. One great thing about bikepacking is we don't have an overseeing body, right? An organization that is telling people, the way that you have to create events in order to get the certain time and all this kind of stuff. And it creates a little ambiguity. But I'm personally fine with that ambiguity. What I like is that, I think it speaks to how cool this sport is. Like, I think we celebrate the different ways and modalities in which we, take on any course. I mean, the AZT just happened. So the Arizona Trail Race, right? Like you could do it single speed, fully rigid, hardtail, carbon suspension. You could go fast, you could go slow. And there's all these different ways of approaching the same route. And I think that's one of the things that this community does well is celebrating that to a degree, and we celebrate it by participating it in our own way. And the same way we want to be able to participate in those different events in our own way, I think what I love the different flavors or spins that different events and different event directors bring to this sport. So, I mean, my events are one way to do it. I don't think it's the only way to do it. I think, there's, I like all the different ways of creating space. And I think the most important thing for me is not how are we regulating that, but are we creating a lot of space? Are we creating a lot of events? Are those events casting a wide net and trying to bring in the widest group of people into our sport? That's what I want to see. And so my mind goes to, sure, yes, doing an event, great. And let's make more, and more, Yeah. And so I don't have a strong sense for, personal feeling for the solo self-supported. I do think that particular concept or that one practice is very much ingrained with the society, and I think it's an important one, but I don't think it has to be the only one, right? Like, I think that there's events like Tour Divide and AZT and Italian Divide, and I bet there's a great one in Poland where you want to see someone just have a good, clean run at that, right? And that's you against the course and your mind, your ability to fix your bike, and that is something that is so beautiful, and I think we all respect it and we admire it and we're in awe of it. But we should also respect and admire and be in awe of people that want to take 15 days on the same course and carry their guitarlele and make up a song along the way and take cool pictures, right? So I'm just a big fan of all of it, and I think that there is a space for all of it, and I would be on the side of wanting to protect and make sure that we all have the space to participate in this sport the way that we want to. And that means from an event standpoint to like even the cultural narrative that we have around how we talk about these events and is the way we talk about it, is the way we dress, are the expensive bikes, are these things limiting our ability to grow and bring people into this wonderful sport? And if so, then yeah, those are the things I want to push back against a little bit, I guess, And I would like to say, I mean, I feel like I'm almost preaching. I think that this sport this community does a great job of having a wide gate, and I think we do a great job of that. And it's just something I want to continue to amplify,
Sure, and I appreciate this because it's like a ton of inclusiveness. That is like nice word nowadays that we are inclusive. But bikes and bicycle culture has been driving a lot of social changes over the years. Like when you just read through the history of cycling, there is like many areas where people just like used bikes to drive some kind of social change, and this inclusiveness, I think it's what we need, right? It's something that that we all need, we all appreciate, because it's, I would say, to me, with so many of different races or events, it's like with so many different restaurants. You have a mood for a particular restaurant, you go there. You have a mood for something else, so you would like to experiment or try. You can go experiment and try, and there will be a community and group of people who would like you to drive you into this, show you all the details, right? This is one thing. And I think the other is, to me, those races and events are also... it means that someone did a solid homework. Like you said, like, I know the trails. I lived there. I can show you the best places that most probably you would have never found without this event. I don't want to say without me, but it will take you, years to explore. And then you have it here, served, packed, wrapped. Please consume. Please be my guest, right?
Yeah. Consume responsibly or not,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, that's a great way just to create more spaces by the people. And I didn't anticipate that this happening on any level, whether it was with Bikes or Death being successful or with the Texas Showdown series, like becoming successful. But it does speak to, I think, to some degree, of like, the world is starved for people to like stand up and like create something, right? Whether it's a podcast or a new event or create a cool route with cool pictures and put that out there. This is a great space to do that. I mean, there's still a lot of opportunity. I think we're just going to see it keep growing and growing and growing. And so, I think we'll just keep seeing more of that, but it's what is building this community is everybody who's contributing, on some level.
Yeah, perfect. So, Patrick, thank you very much for spending this time with me. I would like to closely conclude this, but the last question I ask to each and every person at the podcast is about, how many bicycles do you have?
Hold on. Let me get a visual for this one. I want to see if this counts.
This is a great question. I might steal this question since we're gonna start stealing from each other. Does this count as a bicycle?
Oh, that's awesome! Of course it does.
Okay. This is my clown. This is one of my clown bikes.
Oh. So, and the name is amazing. The Aggressor, right?
Yeah, the Aggressor. That one is that one mine? I can't remember. I have two of these. And I bring these to my events, and we do clown bike races. So it's quite fun. And I want to get a whole fleet of them. I'm going to get rock guys to like make some bags and like get it all tricked out. So if we're counting those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are mine, not 8 that are in my house, but I would say 8 that are mine. And I just ordered 2 more, so I have 2 on the way.
Okay, so it counts as 10.
We'll count it as 10.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's like, it's really okay. It's one of my guests just told me, I know why you asked this question, because you always want to tell your wife that there are so many people that have more bikes than you do, right? So, Patrick, I would like to thank you very much for all the job you do for the community, for your local community, but also for the global community. I think it's like, I would like you to understand that you do have an impact, you do have an influence on the global community, and I think that's. If this is a word of appreciation, I want to give it to you, that you really shape how people communicate about the events, how they refer to you. It's like, oh, you do this like Bikes to Death, right? So you are doing things that are a reference points to other podcasts, to other producers, to other people who run the events as well. So I would like to thank you for this. I would like to thank you for your time and spending this time with me and with the listeners of my podcast.
Absolutely, man. That's very kind words. And as I said, I think we might have not been recording at this juncture, but so much of what we do happens within our house, within these walls, and it just goes out in the world, and we don't often know the impact that it has. Like, I can see the download numbers, and I can see the watch time, and I can see the likes on Instagram and stuff like that. But, I rarely get an insight into what type of impact it has, like in the community or in people's lives. And so not just for myself, but I as a curious person, which we established I am, I appreciate that feedback. And I feel like, man, I feel very fortunate to be in this position. I really do. Like, I love this community. I love being a part of it. And it feels really good to be able to have a seat at the table. And I appreciate that people think that I'm, to some degree, being a good steward of that seat. And I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your time. We're all contributing. We're all on the same team, and we're all trying to tell people to go ride their damn bikes. And, I don't think I'm the only one doing it, And so I think we're all contributing to the greater good of what's happening. And I've had a lot of fun, man. It's been a good time. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think that's, I will do my best to create an opportunity so that we can talk live and maybe record live. So fingers crossed.
I'll go to Poland.
Perfect. You please do feel invited.
All right. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you
I
so
appreciate
much.
it, man. Absolutely. Have a good day.
Earborne Media.
Produkcja oryginalna Earborne Media.